History informs our present and shapes our future. And let's make a stop here and let's look at history of Sudan. So Sudan is a country that is located in Northeast Africa. The history of Sudan dates back to ancient times with evidence of human activity in the region dating back to the Paleolithic era. The region was home to several ancient kingdoms, including the Kingdom of Kush, which ruled over a large part of Sudan and Egypt from the 8th century BC to the 4th century AD. The Kingdom of Kush was known for its sophisticated culture, including its architecture, art, and writing system. And so let's make a stop here. So that means already Sudan had a culture where people, it was like, this is what we would call civilization, because there was already architecture, there was art, and there was writing system. That means the people of Sudan could read and write, because of course you can't have a writing system when you don't know what you're reading, right? So in the 7th century, that's when everything started falling apart. And that was when the Arab traders and Muslim missionaries began to arrive in Sudan. And that quite interfered with things a little bit, because there was the spread of Islam throughout the region, and there were so many emerging Islamic states, including that of Fungi Sultanate, who ruled over much of Sudan from the 16th to the 19th century. So now, at this particular point, foreigners have already come in, and there has already been changes because of the way things were being done. Probably in terms of religion, people had to change to get accommodate the Islamic religion, because the missionaries were there to, of course, to preach. So now in the 19th century, Sudan became a focus of the European colonialism, and a lot of things fell apart at this particular point in time, because in 1821 the Ottoman Empire conquered Sudan, and that means they lost control of their country. And in 1899, then the British now took over control of the country, and they established it as a condominium with Egypt. So that means they were sharing, the British were sharing Sudan with Egypt. So during the colonial period, Sudan was exploited for its resources. Of course, we know the missionaries came to look for resources, and Sudan is not an exception, because they found gold, oil, and cotton. And many Sudanese at this particular point were now forced into labor to work for the colonial masters, as well as they were also treated as second-class citizens. That means they were treated as though the country did not belong to them. So now, that's where everything now started. The trauma that we still see in Sudan began, and that became endless. So in the mid 20th century, of course, Sudan started to push for independence from colonial rule, like many countries did in Africa. And in 1956, Sudan gained independence from Egypt and also from Britain and Egypt. And there was a democratic government that was established, which of course didn't last longer than it should have. But then the country continued to experience political instability, economic challenges, and regional conflicts. So there was never peace that was ever found in Sudan that was stable. There was no stability. So in 1989, a military coup led by the General Omar al-Bashir overthrew the democratically elected government that did not even last long, and Sudan was ruled by a military dictatorship for several decades. So during this time, the country continued to experience civil wars, and also ethnic conflicts, and human rights abuses. So in 2019, there was a popular uprising. People started doing demonstrations, and months of demonstrations. The Sudanese military ousted Omar al-Bashir in another coup, and a transitional military council was established. but it faced a lot of continued protest and pressure from the international community. Was also there to make sure that this government is ceded back to civilian government. So like the military rule was something that people never wanted. And at this particular point, I would like to say, to tell you what a military rule is. A military rule is a form of government in which the military exercises significant control over the state and its institutions. And in Sudan, military rule has really been recurring because the civilians have never had like a right to democratically choose their leaders. And this has happened since the country gained independence. So in August 2019, a power sharing agreement was reached between the military and the civilian opposition leaders. And this tried somehow to pave way for transition, for transition from a military rule to a civilian rule, but it never happened. There has been a lot of tension between the military and the civilian factions, that is the paramilitary, and this has continued to simmer until what exploded in what we can call now the war. So this is a war between the military of Sudan and the paramilitary, because the paramilitary want civilian rule, but the military does not want to cede power to the civilians. They want to retain it. So this has mostly been what has caused the problem in Sudan. But as we can see, Sudan has, just to conclude, as we can see, Sudan was already a country that was almost civilized before the coming of the Arabs and the British. And at the end of the day, we pray for peace in Sudan, and we hope that they can look at their history and try to use it to inform the future of the country to a more stable state. And we also pray for those people that have lost life in the war, and we pray for peace. And also we also appeal for the people of Sudan to consider a peaceful coexistence in the country.